Welcome back to the podcast, you beautiful soul. Thank you for joining me today. If you haven't already, guys, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And if you haven't already, guys, I'd love for you to like this video. It just shares it with more people, allows me to help more people, impact more people in a meaningful way. So if you guys could like the video for me, I'd be very grateful for it. In 3, 2, 1, you've liked the video. Let's move on. Guys, we're going to be talking about the importance and how to be your true, authentic self. This is a topic that I think is so not spoken about enough, if that's the right term to use, because we get so caught up with our day-to-day living of accumulation. We need to make more money, have more cars, have more houses, achieve. And that's a part of life. And I'm all about goal setting. I run workshops on goal setting. I teach goal setting. But the thing that I would like to address in this podcast is what's the fuel behind your goal setting and who are you being day to day? Because you'll hear me, I'll go through, one of my points is your light shines brightest when you let it shine freely. Your authentic self comes through when you don't restrict it from ego, from mass, from expectations, from putting other people's values or subordinating to other people's values, and it's being the most authentic version of you. This is the most overused quote in my work that I use all the time. It's the statue of David. If you've watched this, you've probably heard this, but I'm going to use it again. The statue of David, Michelangelo created or sculpted the statue of David, and someone came up to him and asked him, "How did you make such a beautiful piece of art? How did you do this?" And his answer was beautifully profound. He said, "Look, it was really easy. David was always there in the statue. I just had to remove everything that wasn't him." And if you let that sink in, and if you apply that to yourself, and I'll tell you how to do that, it's understanding that your true self, your authentic self, is already in you. You've just got all this layers of bullshit, ego, personas, mask, expectations that you've put on top of yourself that is masking and dimming your light. And I'm going to show you how to fix that. But that is what most people are doing. They're trying to be number 2 of someone else. You will never be fulfilled. You will never be happy trying to be number 2 of someone else. Your light shines brightest when you allow it to shine freely. Listen to what I just said. Your light shines brightest when you let it shine freely. Because let's use an example. Think of when you were a young man, young boy, a young girl, whatever you identify yourself as. When you were a child and you were in a safe environment, when you weren't on fight or flight, when you weren't stressed, when you weren't hyperventilating, when you weren't on stress mode, when you were in a safe environment and you felt safe to express yourself freely. Did you struggle with lack of confidence then? Absolutely not. Were you thinking about other people's opinions? Absolutely not. Were you overwhelmed? Absolutely. Like, you were the most confident, authentic, weird, silly, quirky, interesting, whatever, curious version of you. And that there is your authentic self. But as we grow up, through education, through parents, through dating, through society as a whole, is we learn, especially through social media, is we learn these, or we adopt or take on these bullshit beliefs, which are also known as limiting beliefs, all these, personas, all these masks of who we have to be loved, or who we have to be good enough. You need to have a certain amount of money in your bank account. You need to have a certain body. You need to look a certain way. You need to talk a certain way. You need to not share your emotions. You not need to be hard. You need to be whatever it may be. We've all picked them up from somewhere. And it's all of those beliefs, all of those personas, all of those masks are all layers on top of the statue of David, which is you. So if you've picked up, say you're in a relationship and they say they break up with you, they dump you and they say something mean. It's because you're not good looking enough. Your body's not good enough. You are overweight. You're too whatever. Your ass is not big enough. You're not pretty enough. You don't have enough money, whatever it may be. And then that really hurts you. That could be a wound, and we're going to get to wounds soon. But then you might develop a belief that I'm only loved if I look a certain way. I'm only lovable if I have a certain amount of money. I'm only good enough if I have this. So And again, that's just one example. You might have had it from your parents. You might have been disciplined or smacked or hurt if you didn't act a certain way. You didn't be a certain way. You weren't on time. You weren't polite. You weren't whatever. And some of these are good and bad beliefs. I'm not here to judge what the belief is. But what I'm trying to get to is your most confident, authentic, beautiful, quirky, authentic self is in you naturally. And people, this ties into self-worth, is people who struggle with self-worth is they're not being themselves. Just use that example I used before, that young child, the younger version of yourself, when you felt safe, you didn't struggle with self-worth. You weren't caring about people's opinions. You weren't worried about the past. You weren't worried about the future. You were present, being your confident, beautiful, quirky, interesting self. But again, we pick up personas, we pick up people's expectations. We need to be certain ways because of, again, religion even ties into that. You need to be a certain way for you to be loved and accepted into heaven, or you go to hell. That's literally religion, right? So what I want to encourage you guys to do from this podcast is I want you guys to understand that you will not be fulfilled and happy and have a beautiful quality of life when you're trying to be someone else. You will never be happy. You will never be fulfilled trying to be number two of someone else. You will only be, your light is going to shine brightest when you are being the most fullest expression of who you are. So what I would love for you guys to do, how do we do that is a good question. How do we be ourselves? How do we be authentic? There's a couple of things you can do. So firstly, healing. We want to start healing and doing the inner work. This ties into traumas. This ties into shadow work. This ties into insecurities. This ties into past wounds. This ties into things that you're holding on to. I made a post about this the other day, which went quite, got a lot of shares and got a lot of comments, is your ego. And the ego is a persona. It's the mask. The ego is an identity of who we've created through everything we've gone through, everything I've been talking about in this podcast, of who we need to be good enough. We need to have the clothes, we need to have the car, we need to have the money, we need to have the body, we need to have whatever. That's the ego. And the ego shows up when your wounds are triggered. So if I was to come over and to touch a wound of yours, say you've got insecurities around your body, and I was to say something about your body and it triggers you, your ego is going to show up. And again, your ego, there's your egocentric self and there's your authentic self. So by I guess definition of what I'm saying, the more wounds that you have, the more present your ego self is going to be there. I hope that just clicked for you. So if you've got, I'm just going to make up some random numbers here. Say you had 10 wounds that got triggered every day versus you had 100 wounds that got triggered every single day, the ego is going to be more present with the 100 wounds versus the 10 wounds. And we're never fully healed. That's another point I want to just make right now. Some people think you get to a point where you're never healed. I forget the name of the graph in physics and maths, but it's the graph where, for people that are watching the video, it's like it comes down the x-axis and it goes along, starts to then go along the y-axis, but it never touches it. It exponentially can get closer, but it never fucking touches it. That's what healing is like. You can obviously heal a lot. I've done a lot of self-healing. I'm very grateful to go down this journey, this rabbit hole, and I'm very grateful to be able to help other people heal and develop and improve the quality of their life. But you're never fully healed. That's an illusion. We always have wounds to heal. We always have things to grow. We always have parts to work on in ourselves. But you can obviously get closer and come a long way. So the more healing that you do, the less egocentric you will be because your ego will be less present, and the more authentic you're going to be. So that's my first tip. And how do you do that? I've done podcasts on that. I do courses on that. I'd love to do a strategy call with you. I'd love to do a discovery call with you. I'll put a link in the description below if you'd like to book in for one of those. So that's the first point I want to make for you guys is do the healing work. Because the more wounds that you have, the more your ego is going to show up to protect those wounds. Second part is I want you to get clear on your values. I talk about values almost every single podcast that I do because it's the foundation of human behavior. We all have values and they actually come from our pains and our voids, which are likely our wounds. They're areas that are most important to us. They're most important to the fulfillment of your life. And everyone has their own unique set. Just like we have our own unique fingerprint or thumbprint, we have our own unique set of values. What's important to my life and fulfilling to my life is going to be different to you. We might have similarities, we might have alignment, and that's where you probably congregate with certain people and personality types and certain interests and wants and needs, but we all have our unique set. You might value family higher than me. You probably do. I don't have the highest value of family, but I have a high value on coaching. It's my highest value. I have a high value on learning. I have a high value on relationships. I have a high value on friendships. I have a high value on wealth creation. They're all things that are important to my life. And you might have similarities in what I've spoken about, but you will not be the same as me. Every single person is uniquely different. So this is what most people do though. And just remember this, maybe write this one down, or this is a good little takeaway, is low self-worth is feedback that you are not prioritizing your own values. This is the you can't pour from an empty cup analogy. You need to fill your cup before you fill others. The only time you don't quote need to do that is when you have kids. When you've got kids, you literally need to put someone else's needs ahead of your own, otherwise they don't survive. That's one of the few times in life where we actually quote need to do that. But outside of that, you want to make sure you're being selfish to be selfless. Fill from your cup so you can pour from a full cup. That is what I would recommend to you guys. So back to values is get clear on what's most important to you. I have a process that I take you through. I can help every single one of you guys with that. It's a list of questions. It's about 12 or so questions, and we categorize them, we label them. So there is a process to go through. But just for a general sort of vague idea of them, is just think about what areas are most important to you, and don't put other people's values ahead of yours. Feeling guilty is feedback. You're putting someone else's values ahead of yours. So if you feel guilty doing something, whenever you feel guilt, you are literally putting someone else's expectations and values ahead of yours. So get clear on what the top 3 are the most important, but normally top 5 to 7. What are the most important areas of your life? It might be family, it might be relationship, it might be career, it might be finances, it might be learning, it might be coaching, it might be music, it might be dancing, it might be traveling, it might be, I don't know, there's many, many different things. Whatever, it might be sports. Whatever you think about, whatever you talk about, whatever energizes you, whatever you visualize about, those are all snippets and feedback of what your values are. So this is the first tool I teach everyone when I work with them is values. Because you want to understand who you are, where you are, so you can figure out where you want to go. So that would be another tip that I would recommend for you guys is really get clear on your values. What are your values and prioritize them and doing the inner healing work, okay? And how to heal, that's a fucking conversation for another day. That's a big can of worms. Last tip that I want to give you guys today. This is called inner child work. If you've ever heard that term, when I first heard it, I was like, what the hell, what do you mean? What is inner child work? So I didn't really understand the term when someone said it. So obviously dove down the rabbit hole and figured it out. And essentially, it's healing your inner child. So doing the healing work, what I mentioned earlier in this podcast, this definitely ties into that as well. But another way is expressing your inner child. So what I want you to do is I want you to write down or think about what are the things that you used to do as a child because you loved it. You didn't need any accountability. You didn't need anyone following you up to do it. You just did it because you loved it. For me, video games. For me, sports. Like I love kicking a football around. I love throwing balls around. A vortex, if you guys know what a vortex is. I love games. Table tennis, I'm recently not recently, but I've been getting really into table tennis lately. So for me, it's games. I love games. I love playing games. It's awesome. And I guess when I got into, my adulthood and my business, the start of my business career, I was just business. And I really neglected doing things that I fucking loved. Things that lit me up, things that were important to me that I really found meaningful. And so a really easy way to do that is to think about the things you loved doing while you were a child. What did you do? What did you love? What inspired you? What energized you? What did you find joy doing? And start doing them. As simple as that sounds. Just start doing them again. So schedule some of that into your calendar. If you love cards and playing cards, do that. If you love reading, read some more. If you love coloring in, love painting, do some painting. Do things that you love doing to allow your inner child to shine through. Remember the statue of David, you want to let that that authentic version of you shine through. And those are my tips, guys. So I just want to rehash and summarize these points so you can take them away and start doing something about them. Is number one, understand the statue of David analogy. The real, confident, authentic, genuine version of you is inside of you. Remember that. It wants to shine through, and it shines the brightest when you let it shine freely. You want to understand it ties into self-worth, into confidence, into certainty, into being the best version of you. Another side note on that is when you're being your authentic self, you're going to scare people off. Good. You're scaring off the wrong people. You want that to happen. And guess who you're left with? You're left with the right people for you. The people that love you for being you. Think about the reverse of that. If you're not being who you are, you're trying to put on a mask, a persona, trying to impress people that you don't give a shit about, you will attract people into your life, but you're attracting people who don't actually like the real version of you. They like this fake persona, mask-wearing version of you. It's not actually the real you. Isn't that counterintuitive? So you want to be yourself and you want to scare those people off because they're not the right people for your fucking life. Get clear on who you are. Be that version of you. You'll scare away the wrong people and you'll be left with the right people. Understand the healing work. Do the inner healing work, guys. If you'd like to do that with me, I'd love to serve you. I'll put a link, again, the link below to book in for a free strategy call with me. I can certainly show you how to heal. That's a big part of my work. It's a big part of who I am. It's part of my purpose. So I can certainly help you with that because the more wounds you have, the more your ego is going to be present to defend them, which therefore means you're going to be less authentic and more egocentric. Prioritize your values. So figure out what are the most important areas to you. I do have a process to show you how to do that, but just generally think about what's most important to you and then prioritize those areas, schedule them into your calendar. Whatever doesn't get scheduled doesn't get done. Remember that line. And last point is child play. Let your inner child play. Let your inner child shine through. Do things that you love doing as a kid, whether it's games, whether it's reading, whether it's painting, whether it's dancing, whether it's climbing trees, whatever you love doing as a kid, do that. Climbing trees is actually one of mine, so doing rock climbing is quite fun for me. So do things that you love, guys. Prioritize yourself. If you got value from this, guys, I'd love if you haven't already, please like the video. It does allow me to share this with more people, impact more people, help more people, and share it with a friend. Share it with a friend, comment below, let me know your thoughts, and I'd love to connect with you guys. I do have a free strategy call below if you'd like to book in for that. I'd love to connect with you, love to help you guys. Thank you for getting to the end of this podcast. Much love. I'll see you in the next episode. See ya.